Greetings.
Hello.
My greetings. Well met.
Greetings, traveler. Greetings, friend.
The pleasure is mine.
Hello and welcome to episode 273 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, January 7th, 2021 in the evening. Happy New Year. It's been an interesting 7 days. Joining you from Gadsden, New York, it's me, Ridiculous Hat. From Carrizan, California, we got Bodikus.
Who are you? We got news before the show, and I just can't move past it.
We'll talk about it. From Undercity, Pennsylvania, it's Edelweiss.
Hello, everyone.
And from wherever you are, listeners, we've got you. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to find out how you can support us, receive rewards, and return, head to patreon.com/Concede. You can also support us by leaving an iTunes review. Totally free, really helps other people find the show. And we've got some new patrons, Aaron L., Jonathan, and our newest producer, Dr. Fish. Thank you so much, everyone, for your support. Dr. Fish, you're the real MVP. And, yeah, been good start to the new year there. Life and Ladder, we'll just get out of the way. I'm not going to talk about current events, but we're hoping that we can provide a little distraction from them here. Yeah. Because outside of that, things have been kind of okay, I think.
I don't know. You go first. How
Okay.
about you start?
I'd love to go first. So I hit Legend already in Standard. I got there on the 3rd or so. I was playing mostly the aggro combo list that I've been playing for a while. It's on Vicious Syndicate this week, so if you want to check it out, it's over there.
Aggro combo, what class?
Rogue, aggro combo Rogue.
Oh, okay, good.
Yep, But I was getting a little bored towards rank 1-ish, so instead I decided to play some Dark Lair Zoo. Had a lot of fun. Got there, I think it was like the morning of it was overnight from the 2nd to the 3rd. Came in at like 150 Legend. I also crossed over to level 50. So I actually went in one day, I went from level 48 to 53, and we'll talk about that experience a little bit, but the level 50 portrait I chose was not Rogue. And I'd like to explain that, if anyone would like to let me explain that, but feel free, you have something to say? Y'all have something to say?
I'm staying muted. I'm very interested to hear the thought process behind this decision, because I know you have good thought processes, so we'll see how this goes, and I'll determine my judgment after I hear your reasoning.
Okay, but Edelweiss, why are you shaking your head already? What is the issue?
This treason is unspeakable.
You spoke it! You brought it up!
Yeah, well, you know what? So, Druid has a special place in my heart as, like, the class I always despised when I first came to Philadelphia. Was the time of Druid being super, super OP, and I banned it every time. It was so bad that someone at one point brought an autofill Druid because our events were not open deck lists. And, it would still get banned because it was Druid, and Druid was OP. But I have been not liking Druid for a very long time because of crazy ramp BS. And Hat, why have you betrayed us?
Okay, so
I thought we agreed.
So I don't think that any of these 10 portraits are that great. I don't think that any of them are that great. The Valera one is fine, but I prefer both existing Valeras, including Pirate Valera, but especially especially Golden Valera, over this one. In addition, a new Rogue portrait is coming. It's a legendary card that they've alluded to. I'm assuming it's Edwin or Togwaggle. I will use either of those over this Valera. So, if I'm not going to use that Rogue portrait, why should that be my first pick just to sit in my collection? Now, for Druid, I was currently using Dame Hazelbark, because Druid skins are all kind of bad. And
Lunara is fine.
Lunara's okay. I actually prefer regular Golden Mouth over Lunara, but Lunara's fine. Dame Hazelbark at least has the...
It's atrocious.
It at least is a creepy tree, right? And at least so you get under your opponent's skin. But I played against Flying Kraken. Great player. they were rocking the level 50 Malfurion, and it looked kind of cool. So I'm like, you know what? If I'm gonna pick a portrait here, my first one, it should be one that I'd consider using right away. And Druid is the one that I was most likely to switch to right away because it looked kind of cool. And I wasn't going to play a lot of Druid anyways. I usually play Druid just in Wild, just aggro Druid, just to get through, like, Platinum or so. So I picked Druid. It's the Rogue portrait I wouldn't have used. Most of the other class portraits I wouldn't have used. I'm trying to think of one that I would have even thought about using. Like, I don't think that any of the 10 looked all that great. But Druid is the one that I was most likely to use right away.
I agree that I wasn't super into too many of the 10, but the Rogue one was the best by far for me. And it's
But you're
not
switching
really a
off OG
question.
Valera?
Yeah. I'm not into OG Bolero so
She's
much.
got the green
Like
daggers.
I've been using my Ev forever.
Oh, Maev?
Yeah, I like my Ev's character.
Was your first favorite Rogue deck Quest Rogue?
Maybe.
Okay. Quest Rogue players like Maev. That's a thing.
I want to say, I respect both of your opinions on what you decide, but you're both wrong. And all 10 hero portraits are awesome, and the Rogue one is clearly the best. And I can't believe you didn't pick it and start using it instantly. I've literally never changed a hero portrait until I got this Rogue skin. Are you kidding me? This Rogue skin is amazing.
It's
So,
very good.
I have changed many hero portraits. I knew I wasn't going to pick Paladin, though that was my second choice because I'm hard locked on Serenoio. I knew I wasn't going to pick Shaman because I'm hard locked on
Oh.
Morgul. No reason to pick Warlock because I knew I was going to stick with Nemsy. And so Rogue, I'm still rocking Pirate Valera. So I'm just going to keep rolling with Pirate Valera.
So you're
Being
telling me you don't
objectively wrong was just a myth.
like you could even like have certain decks have different like hero portraits on them, so like you could have even used multiple, and you're talking about like a future Rogue portrait that doesn't exist yet. You're like, oh, I'll probably use that one when you could just be using this awesome one. Are you Oh my
This
gosh.
would be my number 3 Rogue portrait if I picked it and had it right now. I would pick both original Valeras over this one right now, and I would pick this over Maev. But I would.
I'm not
I would
big on
take.
Captain. I don't really
Okay.
like Captain.
Okay.
All
I don't
Rogue
know.
hero portraits are awesome and deserve their own amount of time as a deck list, and you should use all of them.
You'd never
I'm
change a hero portrait
disappointed.
before this. You think I'm gonna go in and change portraits per deck?
I mean,
Well,
you could.
see, because you've got like 4 Rogue decks, and so to differentiate, you have like a different on each one.
When I differentiate, I actually
and what-
use this other feature. It's called the name, and the name tells me what the deck is. That's usually
yeah.
what I use. And I've never used Maev once. Never once.
Well, you should have when you played Quest Rogue, because it would have made sense.
No, it's a giveaway. You got to play Valera and then the Quest Rogue, then they don't expect it. So, anyways, besides
well, I
that,
respect both of your decisions, and I'm still disappointed.
yeah, it sounds like my parents.
What?
So,
I picked Rogue. I'm with you.
No, I'm not disappointed. I'm disappointed in Hat.
yes,
Obviously.
bring
Like,
it on.
I normally I would pick Mage because Jaina is my fave of the OG heroes.
We have so many
except-
good mage portraits. So many
Well,
good.
and Kultiran Jaina is I think just the best one. And yeah, I already got that.
I
from-
switched to Kultiran Jaina over Fire Mage Jaina, and it was very close.
It was tough.
That's
It
a
was
very
very
close
hard.
decision.
It's a
but-
tough decision. I
but-
might go back every now and again.
But the Kultiran portrait is gorgeous, super nice.
Mhm.
So really happy with that one. And yeah, like Super Cop is saying in chat, if there was random hero portrait, I would rock random hero portrait, except on Paladin. That stays with Serenoio forever.
See, I have Liadrin, Kultiran Jaina. I have the new Valera. It's got to be Lunara
And Hilda.
for Druid, and Hilda for Warrior. Finally, Warlock. Nemsy is definitely the weakest for me. So I kind of go N'Zoth because N'Zoth is sort of. I mean, it's an old god. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then we've got what is it? Elise's sister for Demon
Arana.
Hunter.
Yeah.
Arana. Tyrande for Priest. What do we have left?
Sylvanas
That might be
or
all of them.
Illyria.
Oh yeah. Sylvan. I had Illyria. Switched to Sylvanas for Hunter.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I'm gonna get the rogue one eventually. There will be more opportunities to get these, but for now, I picked druid and I turned it on immediately. Because if I picked the
By the
Valera
way,
one,
I
it would just
told you.
what?
Told you there'd be more opportunities to get these.
Meh, of
hero
course,
portraits.
they're not just gonna keep
What do
these.
you mean? Of course, you told me I was wrong.
I don't think I said that was wrong. I said we don't know about it yet.
No, you said I was wrong.
Okay, it sounds like something I
remember
would say.
feeling-
So, Botticus, I apologize for saying you were wrong. How's life and ladder? Go ahead.
I mean, it's fine. I've been playing mostly BGs. Pretty much just play constructed right now for completing quests that I have to complete playing the game. Mainly just because it's not like hit legend last month with Rogue, and just it's not as interesting as it was, even though it's basically the same. But I did hit level 50. I chose, obviously I chose Rogue and equipped it right away, instantly, because it's great. Even though I think all 10 hero portraits are very good and would probably use all of them, because I think they're sweet, even though you two don't seem to agree, but that's fine. Everyone has their own opinions. Had a pretty interesting game I posted about in Discord, where I was pretty far behind as Zephyrus, and got a light fang off. I had to use a wish to triple into a 5-drop and got a light fang, but was still pretty far behind. I had taken a lot of damage, and then ended up getting a Bran and a Battle Master, which stabilized me. And then normally you don't want to be running like Bran and Light Fang at the same time, but it ended up working out because I just ran 4 different minion types: Bran, Light Fang, and the other new 5-drop, the Menagerie
Mithrax?
5-drop. Yeah, that one
Mithrax.
also helped me stabilize a bit. But essentially with Zephyrus, I was just thinking like, as soon as, because I had one wish left, I was like, as soon as I hit either a Light Fang or a Bran, then I can just triple that and then ditch the other one. Ended up tripling the Light Fang and got a very large Annihilan that did not get poisoned, which was very good. So it's a sweet game. It's not pretty often you either want to go Light Fang or you want to go Bran. You don't want to go both at the same time. But my board state just kind of worked out where I was able to utilize both of them, and it worked out for turning around what I thought was going to be a quick exit into a victory. And I'm at 6K now, and I'm still getting 300 for a win, which makes me think that my hidden MMR is still a bit higher. I queued into a lobby with Pathra last night, and she's around 9K, so I'm guessing my hidden MMR is somewhere between 8 and 9K, not quite the top 200 mark like I used to be, but still decently rated, which is cool to see.
How are you finding the Dark Moon prizes still?
I think they're fine. It's interesting. I actually saw a clip of Dog talking about adding a minion permanently to Bob's Tavern, and it made a lot of sense because I was picking that one relatively often when the other choices weren't great. But I don't think I'll be picking that one as often anymore because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you actually when you talk about how many more minions it actually lets you see. It makes a lot of sense that you'd rather just have like 2 gold, or I mean, you pretty much always want to pick like the best choices seem to be tier 1 minion, or 2 gold coins, or
Free refreshes is pretty good.
capture the flag. All your team gets +1/+1. I almost never pick free refreshes.
Really?
It's fine. It's like 3 gold, but it's not as useful as actual gold.
Yeah.
I picked it for the first time, I think, last night as patches because it made a trying to refresh for pirates, and then instantly refreshed 3 times and saw no pirates. So that's kind of results oriented, but also, I haven't figured out how to play patches. I just try to buy pirates, and then I lose.
seems a good level 1 strategy of buy pirates with pirate hero. But yeah, it's interesting. I still think that Battlegrounds might be the most fun mode right now. I've really enjoyed my time with it in this particular iteration. Niha and Vertute posted some really great info about it in our Discord because they're both very strong players. Niha in particular is over 10k and talked about kind of how leveling is different in this meta, and you really, really, really want to level on 8 gold, not on 9 gold, and then get to level 5 as quickly as possible, because finding a carry has never been more important. The Dark Moon prizes make this meta super fast. And it's
Yeah,
felt
that's why
different.
that's why your best hero is Elise and all of the heroes that power level really well. Like so Onu, is that what the name
Omu,
of it?
Omu,
Omu.
OMU.
I mean, Elise is the best by like a wide margin because you can just level on 6 gold to 3, and then just sell a unit and get a 3-drop, and then you just level every other turn from there, and just like get to either sell a unit or instantly get a unit of the higher tavern tier. So you just get to discover carries really easily, and you don't fall behind very easily. So whichever heroes are good at leveling quickly tend to be the ones that are doing really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm playing a bit of Elise. It looks like Akazamzrak's actually really high up here, probably because a lot of the strategies involve leveling when you have 1 gold left, so it makes sense to level and then get a hero power in. And even the great Akazamzrak's like secret is a relatively powerful effect to happen, even if it's kind of a one-time effect. And then Alakir just levels really easily. Ragnaros doesn't level super easily, but scales, I guess, really well in the
You
late
can
game.
kind of build your own carry that way. Like, it's Rag with a Bronze Warden can just go so far. There are a lot of ways to make Rag. Like, a lot of the meta right now feels like finding a really good carry on 5, and Rag can kind of build its own without needing to go super hard and find the right Light Fang, the right brand, the right Rivendare, whatever. I've found it to be kind of easier to pilot, and it seems really consistent at top 4ing.
Oh man, Elise they're gonna have to nerf Elise again because her pick rate's at 82.7%.
Whoa, really?
She's
Huh.
by far the best.
But not as
Hero.
bad as like Millhouse. I don't think she's as bad as like Millhouse was.
In the top
when
20%, she's
Millhouse
the
was
only tier
broken.
1 hero right now. She's the only one with a average placement above 4th place. So
Yeah,
I don't think
but
it's
it's not
quite as
like
bad as like Eudora or Maiev was, but it's still
right.
an outlier by a pretty significant amount.
Yeah, I mean, definitely deserving of a nerf, but not as egregious as some of the super broken heroes like George, old George, or no, not George, old Tyrion.
Oh, well, sure.
Like original Tyrion and original Millhouse, or not original, was it
Post buff.
second version of Millhouse? Yeah,
Millhouse
the
2.
buffed Millhouse was super broken.
So Edelweiss, how about you? How's your life and ladder?
I don't play a ton of BGs, or even if I do, I just kind of do what I want. I don't really
Yeah.
pay attention to the meta or anything. I don't have just replay on because I'm on my iPad. So I played some Quest Shaman on stream earlier this week. Had a lot of fun. Played it a bit before that as well. I don't know how I was winning, but I did. I think I had like a 75% win rate, pretty decent. That was up to Diamond 5. So we'll see how it goes from Diamond 5 to Legend. I'm going to maybe keep pushing with it, although I did have some other decks catch my eye that I'm interested in. Primarily No Hands, and then someone else jumped in as well, mentioned a Nozdormu Paladin. So excited to try that out, since it's something I had been working with, and I'd been looking for a kind of happy medium, and I might have found that list now. So yeah, being able to just sort of go to turn 10 and like skip all the in between is pretty fun, particularly with Paladin having solid clears in terms of Libram plus Pyro kind of stuff. It's very nice.
Did either of you see the streamer playing Wild Clown Paladin?
No, I did not.
Have either of you seen that?
Nope.
It uses
No.
prismatic lens and
course it-
a
of course
bunch
it
of
does.
all of the cheap
Because it's easy
spells.
easy to
Yeah.
corrupt if you.
Yeah.
Right.
It was pretty
Okay.
great. I
Interesting.
don't. I was It was like a sequence of clips that I watched.
And Paladin and Wild has hand buff stuff, so that makes sense.
Well, it didn't even do that because it would play
Oh.
that on 4, and then it plays the 2-drop, the Paladin 2-drop that increases all of your. It does the Lotheb effect,
Rebuke.
so it does. Yeah, it goes Rebuke Clown, and then they
Gotcha.
just die the next turn.
Cool. That sounds fun as well.
I don't know if it's good, but
play it
I
for a
saw a
while.
streamer doing really well with it, so I thought it was pretty neat.
That sounds goofy, and I cannot say that I've seen it, and I cannot say that I like anything about what it's trying to do. But I don't know how to finish that sentence. Yeah. So anyways, well, we actually do have a few news items to discuss. It's been 2 weeks since our last full show. So let's jump right in and talk about it. We've got some direct news from Iksar himself.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
All right, so first up, we have the Book of Heroes Uther is out. Unfortunately, I have not had a chance to play it, but based on some conversations we were having, Edelweiss sounds like this one is a bit different than or is a bit more challenging than maybe some of the previous Book of Heroes.
Yeah, I don't know if I was getting unlucky or honestly, I believe what it was is I tried to autopilot this adventure, and that doesn't go great. You can't approach this like, I'm good at ladder, I'll beat AI for sure. This one actually felt like a bit of a puzzle that you had to pay attention to sort of how they played things out, because even though you have access to their hero power going into the match, and so you can see that they have a very powerful hero power, you don't know how their deck plays out. So you kind of, it took me a couple games of actually losing to the AI to figure out what my game plan should be in response to theirs. And I was sort of used to cruising through and pretty much one-shotting every match in the previous Book of Heroes solo content. This felt a lot more challenging. Also, the only hero so far who dies at the end. I think that's what happened. Well, spoiler alert. Sorry.
Is that a spoiler? I don't know.
It happened in Warcraft 3, the first one.
I sort of assumed people would have played Warcraft 3.
I didn't. So actually, I think I did, but I don't ever pay attention to story. So is it a spoiler if you don't care about story?
I don't know. Warcraft 3 was a great game and definitely worth playing.
Yes, though Reforged has had some hits and misses, shall we say.
Yeah, but like, if you're just playing for the story, that's all I ever played it for.
I like the gameplay. I don't know. Anyways.
So anyway, yeah, the Book of Heroes is out. You can get your Paladin booster pack, Paladin pack,
class pack. Yes.
Completing this, and yeah, try it out. But be careful, apparently, because it's a little more tough than some of the other ones. In addition, there's not a whole ton of news since everybody's just kind of starting to get back to the Blizzard offices. Hasn't been a ton going on, but we have a bunch of interesting comments from Reddit that Iksar posted that gives us a little bit of insight as to kind of what's been going on. The first one is probably one of the more major. It's not really an announcement, but more of a update to how they're going to potentially be doing the rewards track for future expansions. Essentially, instead of having 50 levels, they're going to go up to 100 levels, but it's going to require the same amount of experience that the current reward track takes to get to level 50. So essentially, you'll be getting to level 100 in about the same amount of time that you would for the level 50, but you'll be getting more. You'll be getting the same amount of rewards more often, if that makes sense.
You just level faster, right? They
yeah.
chopped all the gold in half. They chopped all the rewards in half.
Similar to what they did the post level 50 track, they're doing that to this track, so people can feel rewarded more often instead of having to wait for bigger rewards. They have to wait less often for smaller rewards that are the same amount of rewards, if for the same amount of work, essentially. So good to
It's,
hear that they're iterating, at least.
I don't know about you all. The post level 50 experience is pretty positive for me. Levels just kind of instantly happen all the time, and it feels meaningful, and the number keeps moving all the time. I don't ever really feel stuck. I feel like I can earn gold whenever I need to, and I've got almost 6,000 gold saved up for the next expansion, and we're not halfway through this cycle yet, and that feels pretty good. I don't know.
Yeah, I have 6K, and that was, in spite of my frivolous spending on heroic duels earlier on. So, I would have had more if not for those duels. I think because I don't believe I profited from those duels in the end. So feels really great. I if they're doing what they can to match the experience I'm getting post level 50, and have that be more of the experience pre level 50, all for it.
Yeah, I
still don't know how much gold I have.
Yeah.
But I am leveling. So
How?
I mean, if you
I
know you're not
have
going to use
somewhere
it, yeah.
I have somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 gold. Maybe less, maybe more. I just don't. I don't.
Do you
memorize that
know
number or
roughly
look
what
at it
level
that
you're at?
often. 50
something?
Somewhere between 53 and 57.
Okay. So you probably have in the high five, like 58-ish 100 gold, because that's about where I'm at, and I spend down to 0 every time an expansion comes out. I don't know. I just it's not so much on the rewards, because I think at this point they have put everyone pretty clearly ahead with all the changes they've made and the login bonus and whatever. But more on like it feels like a system that is consistently progressing without me having to dig in and look at it, as opposed to a system where I have to go and check and like, where am I at and how is this going? Because I don't know, because I don't see any in-game progress. Now, usually, if I log in once a day, I get a level and it shows me in the game. So like that experience a lot. I wonder how they got to the original track having levels that cost 9,000 experience. Like, I don't know how they got there, and I'm glad that we never had to experience that, or at least most people didn't. But yeah, I'm glad they're moving as far away from that experience as possible, and they've made these changes overall.
It's actually kind of interesting that you bring that up, that you log in once a day and you get a level, because that would technically be less gold than you were earning before, right? Because you would log in, you do a daily quest and get 60 gold.
At least a level. The day that I on Monday, I cleared my weeklies to get over level 50. I was at 48, and today, which is Thursday, I hit 58. That's 10 levels in 4 days. Like, that's crazy. And that was with clearing all of my dailies on Monday. I think I ended up at 53. And that means 3 days of daily quest plus whatever experience I gained in game. I hit 58. So moving pretty fast.
Right. So if you include the weekly quests, it probably puts you significantly ahead.
Way ahead.
Because we didn't have those before. So if we just had the daily quests, it would be on par.
Yep.
On par, if not,
it'd be a little behind.
Potentially slightly less. But like with the weekly quests, I think it bumps it up way, way higher.
Yep.
Yeah,
as long as you're completing them.
Depending on, how much you play generally, your sort of level flow is going to be different, right? At least for me, it's kind of, we hit weekly quests and it's like, whoop, bunch of levels, and then, trickles off, and then next weekly quest, boop, and it looks like a pulse because you keep spiking every time you get weeklies and complete them within a couple of days. But for other people that, take the whole week to complete their weeklies, it's probably a much more steady progression.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm glad they're making this change. It seems like an informed change, and really, it's whatever they can do to make people worry less about the economy, and that means focus less on the economy, the better. And I think this is a change that does that.
Yep. Thinking
Totally
back
agree.
also to the 10 gold per 3 wins thing, like I wouldn't really know that was like my progress on that unless I got something saying I hit the cap, which honestly was usually more of a negative feeling for me because that meant I had played like too much at one sitting. Whereas this one, it's more of a rush and like feels good getting that like, oh, level 50 gold, another level 50 gold. It's much more positive.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. In addition, we have an update on the mini expansion, or lack thereof an update, I guess, because Iksar says that the mini expansion is definitely still happening, but they're not ready to announce a date or tease any cards from it yet. So either where you were expecting the 17th, is that
19th.
right, Hat?
Right.
Tuesday the
19th?
19th.
Yeah.
Tuesday the 19th.
I am still expecting
So,
that.
Maybe not that anymore.
well,
No,
no,
I'm
that
still
that could make
expecting that.
sense if they start teasing cards on the 12th. Have a week of traditional, or on the 11th or 12th. Have a well, probably I would guess if that is the case, if it comes out on the 19th, we'll probably get an announcement on Monday or Tuesday that says, "Hey, here is the mini expansion, and here is a card," and then they'll tease out cards for the rest of the week, and then give us everything on Tuesday. Or maybe they just announce when it's coming out, don't give us any of the cards, and we just have to figure it out on the day. I don't think they'll do that, but that'd be interesting. People just have to open to figure out what the cards are. People just have to open packs.
Yeah, it might be that. I imagine that they'll have some kind of reveal season. I don't know what it is, but it's been a very long time since they've just put new cards in the game without telling us what they were before. And usually when they pre-patch, we at least have a few days of that. Now, I don't know if they will pre-patch this one or just drop it and it will go live. In the past, they pre-patched on the Thursday before, which would be the 14th, and it would go live on the 19th. But I don't know if that's going to be the case either. So I don't know. We'll find out. But I imagine it is on the closer side.
And then the the next couple comments are in response to people who are, maybe you could say, a little unhappy with the state of standard right now. But we do have confirmation that they're looking into some game balance regarding potentially, where I'm assuming we're looking at like Evolved Shaman and Rogue right now, seem to be the two standouts, but they're not sure that we'll get anything, but they're at least looking into probably the play rate of everything, according to Iksar. And also, basically the achievements. If you play Battlegrounds and you don't want to get spoiled on when you get an achievement before the achievement actually happens, because the game already knows when you've achieved something when a fight starts, but the fight still has to play out in the Battlegrounds. So you'll get a notification that you got an achievement before knowing that you got that achievement. Sometimes they're working on a fix for that. That is not live yet, but is probably somewhat difficult to implement. And also, speaking of of bugs in general, there were some comments about Blizzard fixing some bugs, and essentially Iksar has a response that essentially sums up to, fixing bugs is not an easy thing to do. It's time consuming, and going back and doing it can be very difficult to do. And also, we just got through a large amount of holiday season where people at Blizzard, the Blizzard offices were literally closed. So instead of essentially trying to fix some bugs and potentially mess up Hearthstone or create more bugs during the season or during the holiday season, and making workers go back in to fix them. Things might be taking just a bit longer than usual to get looked at, and I want to remind people to be kind and have empathy for these developers, because despite what some people say, they care a lot about this game and they want to see it perform well. And if things aren't getting fixed right away, there's probably a reason for it. So just be kind is all I would say to that.
Yeah. Iksar has had a few tweets this week specifically about this, and one that really stood out to me was when he had made a comment about how they were aware that achievement timing had some ups and downs, and it was pretty crappy to know how the game ended before it ended, and it was, he said it was tricky timing, and someone on Twitter said, no, it's not tricky, just suppress the notification until the client's ready to deliver it. And Iksar responds with, thank you for that insight. And continues to say, there are a lot of things going on here. It was considered. But his wish is that people's first thought when they saw this thing is, I wonder what makes this difficult, instead of, why are they stupid? And I like that question of the immediate assumption that the Hearthstone devs are incompetent and stupid, instead of saying there must be something here that I'm not understanding about why it's challenging, is... I think that approach is one that we try and take in the show of, where did this go wrong and why, as opposed to why can't they hire decent people? Because I think they have hired good people. We've had Dina on the show. He's a smart guy, and he talks about things intelligently all the time. All the devs we've had on the stream are smart people. So I don't really know why people jump to the conclusion that, no, this was easy and they just completely messed up because they don't know what they're doing. The achievements was clearly partially baked when it got shipped. Same with the rewards track. And they've admitted it multiple times, and they're going to work on it. Nothing else to do.
So yeah, I mean, just I'm sure that almost none of our listeners, I would venture to say none of our listeners would be like this, but spread the idea of empathy for people. We would appreciate that, because
the world's a better place when we're nicer to each other.
Yeah, I agree. And then lastly, there will be a rating reset for Duels coming out in about 3 weeks. Well, about probably closer to 2 weeks now. But if you're looking to get a high Duels rating, now's your chance. But yeah, rating is going to reset in a bit. As well as have some updates with new hero powers and treasures, and probably a whole bunch of new stuff for people who are enjoying that format to try out.
You said in a little over 2 weeks?
Well, it said 3 weeks, and this was published 5 days ago. 5.5 days ago.
So you see where my head is going as far as the timing, right?
Yeah,
because it's what? So 3 weeks from 5 days ago would have been the 23rd. Like, I don't know if they're rounding or whatever. I don't know if that's Tuesday the 19th or Thursday the 21st or whatever, but it looks like it's lining up with the week that we're looking at the mini set dropping. From somewhere.
I just want cards.
Yep.
I just want cards to talk about.
I'd settle for nerfs. I would settle for nerfs. But yes, I would also like some cards. So yeah, I guess that's the news.
I mean, we don't really have, like, since we're not talking about this in Decksplanations, are there nerfs that you have in mind, either of you two?
Yes.
That you would like to see? I know we've talked about the weapon going down to a 3/2, which would be significant and would change some things, which would be nice. But anything else in mind?
Foxy Fraud to -1 and Bloodsworn Mercenary to 4.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean we've kind of discussed a lot of these a ton. I think Foxy Fraud is awesome as a replacement for coin when you're on the play with Rogue, but it is too good of a replacement.
Yeah, 3/2 should cost mana. I would like it if they
Yeah.
cost mana. So I think this one should cost mana. And the deck just does not cost enough. And Shadowstep and Edwin need to go away from the game at some point, but I imagine that'll be in the Classic rework, which is coming in a couple months. You could nerf Prize Plunder to a 1/1 or make it cost 2 if you really wanted to. I think that they won't. But if they just made Foxy Fraud -1 instead of -2, that would be a good start.
Go a long way. You did a lot fewer non-games, right? Because
of Edwin's
you
stupidity.
can't do the crazy Foxy Fraud Edwin things as much. Yeah.
Yeah. There are, I think, a bunch of ways to nudge Rogue, but just hitting Foxy Fraud and making it not reset by its own mana cost would be a good change, and a good place to start. And yeah, then you hit Bloodsworn specifically to stop combo stuff. You don't even need to, I don't think. But it's a good proactive nerf, and obviously you gotta hit Box by Knuckles. Like, you gotta hit Box by Knuckles. Yeah, what a nuts card.
Yeah, because Cage Match Custodian is fine in the other decks that it's in, I think.
I mean, you could make that a 1/1 and it wouldn't be a problem. Like, you could make that a 1/1 or even a 1/2 or something, and it would be not a big deal. Like, it would be more of a trade-off between tempo and value. But if you don't hit Bogspine, it doesn't matter, and if you do hit Bogspine, then it matters a lot, so. Yeah. We'll see. Don't know. And yeah, Casual are in chat asking what our nerfs would be. Yeah, move it to 3 attack. Because you need to hit the Dread Corsair interaction, you need to have it not do as much face damage, you need it to be worse at removal. Compare it to the Corsair Cash nerf, if you want to get an idea of how much of an impact a 1 attack nerf on a weapon can be.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's good. Just wanted to update, see if you had any further thoughts on changes to cards, but that's pretty much it for the news section. Why don't we move into some tournament news?
Yeah, because we have something to talk about.
It's the grand tournament!
All right, so these are grassroots tournaments mostly. Well, actually, we've got 2 from the Far East region. We've got 1 online tournament, the Female Legends tournament. Kat won over Euphemia and Murcielago, I think. Yeah. Female Legends, really awesome tournament circuit for female and non-binary competitors. And Kat's a really great player. Not surprised that she got there. And
I have one edit to this, which is if you do go and watch the stream, you will see a different result. I was advising on this, and unfortunately, Euphemia miscued on the final game, and we had to be given a game loss. It was totally a mistake. It was like she had another version of Shaman that had Sticky Finger in it, and she accidentally queued that one instead of the one that she had registered. Because the match was being streamed, the casters saw the Sticky Finger in her hand. So even though she didn't play it, it was the wrong deck list, and the rules are the rules. But it was very close, and they were good games, so I definitely recommend checking that out. It was over on the Female Legends Twitch. I believe the VODs would be there.
Yeah, shame for that to happen in the finals, but, it's got to enforce the rules, nothing to do about it. The All Star Invitational happened. This is Taiwan versus the world, in a way. They usually have 4 Taiwanese players and 4 players from each of the other regions, one from America, one from Europe, one from APAC, and one from China. So Luna, Bloody Face, took it in the finals over Joy. Taiwanese player. Tyson Surrender were in the top 4. The other 3 Taiwanese players and Lion, who was the Chinese representative, were finished out at the top 8. Great to see Luna take another win, not surprising. And then over in the BG portion, Silver Name and Goddammit won the Battlegrounds portion over Porsche and Jinbei from APAC. So props to them for winning the event. And this weekend there is actually some Hearthstone to watch, assuming they'll be streaming it. The China Gold Series Finals are streaming. So remember, this is how players qualify for Worlds, I believe. No, this isn't how players qualify for Worlds. That's the next. Those are the qualifiers. This is the finale of the China Annual Series. Yeah, it's like the internal kind of China Worlds Masters Tours thing, including Shao Ti, Sif, Leo, XC, CX, who are different players. There are the winners of the 4 different Gold Opens, the 2 Grandmasters winners, the top points earner, and the previous champion. The deck lists are up on the site, and I believe this will be streamed on the Chinese sites on Huya, Duyu, and Bilibili. So links are in the viewing guide on the Chinese streaming sites. It starts at 4 a.m. UTC, so that'll be 11 p.m. Eastern U.S. time on tomorrow. So if you want to watch some Chinese Constructed, you can. And we will report on the decks that win next week. And that's going to do it for the tournament section. Though our listener series is going on, had a great match myself in week number 1, and I like playing the fun decks. I definitely brought OTK, Token Demon Hunter, Highlander, Paladin, and 4 Old God Quest Rogue. Managed to take the win. Yeah.
I really should play in these.
You really should play in these, yes. But so we're going to take a different approach to Decksplanations, because as much fun as it would be to talk about Evolved Shaman, it wouldn't be much fun at all, because you all know the drill there. Instead, we got a really great question in the Discord this past week, and we're going to talk about game design a little bit from our armchair designer viewpoints. So Edelweiss, take it away.
So yeah, we had a listener, Merriweather, kind of bring up some game design stuff, talking about how it's really difficult because of various things players want. So how do you make a meta healthy? Because if things get too consistent, then we get bored, kind of like Gen and Baku. But if we get decks that are too high roll, then it feels like decisions are just sort of, did you hit your good card or not? You'd think of stuff like Barnes, whether it was in Res Priest or the Spell Hunter that just ran Barnes Yasharaj because that was a good thing to do, and then of course just regular created by or Yogg kinds of things. So thank you, Merriweather, for posing this question. Hat responded with a few of the kind of decision points to be made in card design things. We're gonna cover some of those comparisons. So the first we have is sort of the variety versus inconsistency challenge. And obviously we want our games to be different every time. A game like Magic has this because you have your resource is also, it comes in the form of cards. So you do have to draw lands, and it's going to vary whether you draw enough lands or too many or too few, and that provides some kind of variance. But the actual cards in Magic don't really have a randomness to them, because given that it is a paper card game, they have limitations in terms of no engine being able to do that kind of generation for them. So their variance is in this different form. But you will totally hear people complain in Magic about the issues of not hitting their lands or only drawing their lands, and it can be really unfun in terms of not being able to do anything. Hearthstone has built-in taken care of that problem in that you gain a mana crystal guaranteed every single turn from 1 to 10, capping out at 10. But because of that consistency, if you were to not have any random effects in the game of Hearthstone, people would get bored pretty fast. You would just sort of have like very consistent combo decks or aggro decks, and it would be very samey. I do believe that certain random effects have definitely increased over time since original Hearthstone. Part of that is just them wanting to implement really cool stuff, and a lot of really cool stuff that people honestly enjoy has random elements. Certainly in the early days of Hearthstone, the random elements we were complaining about were Mind Control Tech, Ragnaros the Fire Lord, Sylvanas you usually
Knife
picked,
Juggler.
but
Yeah.
Knife Juggler was probably the biggest one. That was
Knife.
probably public enemy number 1.
And
Juggler.
keep in mind as well, when we talk about, so there are a bunch of different types of randomness in Hearthstone, but when we talk about variety versus inconsistency, I want to frame this as, think about Ash's Highlander Hunter. And really, most of the deck in Ashes of Outland, Firebat said this pretty well, that Demon Hunter and Warrior, in his eyes, were the least problematic decks because they felt complete. And a deck like Ash's Highlander Hunter, did I draw my good cards or not? Did I hit Zephyrus? Did I hit Bran? Did I get Rottennest Drake on 5? Did I hit DQA on 9? That sort of thing. Versus not drawing the good card. So we have kind of a built-in metric for figuring out if Blizzard thought something was a problem. Did they change it? Did they nerf it? And you can look at some examples here of some things they've nerfed. When you're looking at really major drawn or mulligan win rate cards, you can really see it. 3 health Ankar was crazy in Pirate Warrior. It was like 20% above the next highest card. Necrium Apothecary. You knew that design was problematic because the games where you didn't draw it, your deck didn't do anything. Same with current Evolve Shaman, honestly. You don't really have a plan B. You have the Evolve plan, or you have, I don't really have a deck. You can look at kind of a broken versus fixed version of this with Corsair Cash. Pre-nerf, you played it, your 3-attack weapon killed whatever they played. It was probably too good. It was definitely too good. And then you just dominated the board. But with 2-attack Corsair Cash, if your opponent played a Bone Chewer Brawler, now you're behind. You actually had to pay a cost for that. Your deck needed to find a plan B. And really, you can tell decks that have good plan Bs without having overwhelmingly powerful plan A really are the poster child for what we're looking for here, what kind of the good design is. And you can look at, well, I mean, Rogue is kind of really good at this just because they've always been a really flexible class. I'm trying to think of when the best example of this would be, but maybe the post-nerf Rise of Shadows Rogue was capable of doing a bunch of damage. It was capable of generating value with Henchclan Burglar and Evil Miscreant. Sometimes you played Togwaggle. Sometimes you played Myras and went for the damage. It had a bunch of different variety to it. Or various Hunter decks over the years. I mean, we talked about in the bonus episode how Hunter had a lot of good stuff going on for it. If you look at Spell Hunter was kind of a control Hunter deck that also was really capable of switching and going face when it needed to. That kind of variety in gameplay, it's going to play out a little differently each time, but it's not the sort of thing where you know you're going to lose a very specific way, or your deck either does this one thing or it falls apart. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think looking at the Keliseth decks is a perfect example of like this situation kind of gone wrong. I think it was sort of one of the first major examples of this problem we had alongside Barnes. I think those were the 2 early serious offenders of this like inconsistent but powerful. And they were too powerful, but you didn't always hit them. And so it was kind of awkward to make a nerf because if you didn't hit it, the deck wasn't doing anything. But you look at the win percentage of, keeping Keliseth, keeping Barnes in the mulligan, it was absurd.
Yeah, because Imprison Scrap Imp, same way.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What a gross
Because these
card.
are cards that provide an insane amount of power if you have them in the opening hand. Kaliseth is obviously best when you can play it before you've drawn very many other cards, because it buffs your entire deck by +1/+1. More if you have the Shadow Steps to go with it. Barnes was typically pulling something ridiculous out of your deck. I think most commonly the super high roll was Yasharaj, because even a 1/1 Yasharaj recruits a big thing from your deck. So you would just kind of snowball with an insane thing. In Hunter, since Barnes makes a 1/1 copy and not the actual thing, the Spell Hunter high roll thing was, well, you wouldn't just run Spell Hunter. Even though there were some very powerful cards, there was a 6-mana card that depended on you only having spells. But it was too good to pass up on having your only minions be Barnes and Yasharaj, because Barnes would make a 1/1 Yasharaj and recruit the 10/10 version. And that was that was just too good to pass up. And I played in tournaments where this happened, and it sucked, but it was just like something you had to deal with. It was more consistent to do regular Spell Hunter and have the very powerful effects of, don't recall the name of this 6-mana spell.
To my side.
Yeah, To My Side.
And make sure your
summons
Rock Dalar was always on, and that
two
sort of
animal
thing.
companions.
Yeah.
Rock Dalar always active. You were more consistent with without the minions, but you didn't have this crazy high roll of turn 4 or turn 3 on the coin just playing Barnes and have a 10/10 and a 3/4 and a 1/1 in play. So
Yeah, I
those
think,
are the most egregious examples.
Also Tip the Scales Paladin, probably
Ugh.
one of the most egregious examples.
Yeah,
Prismatic
though,
Lens,
but
yeah.
at least
One
that
of-
deck
I
had a
think-
plan B. Like, at least you could just play some Murlocs and sometimes attack with some Murloc. I'm not going to defend the design of Lens into Tip
Did
the
it-
Scales.
Did it really have a plan B hat? Did it really?
It felt considerably worse when you
Of
didn't
course,
hit that,
it's
yeah.
yes. Win the game or hope to play some Murlocs on curve. Like, obviously they're going to be different, but it's not like Apothecary Rogue where you drew 1/1s and 9/6s and your deck did nothing.
Mhm.
I would say probably the best example of a good version of this would be like Journey to Ungoro Tempo Mage. Is probably like almost a perfect, well, maybe not a perfect example, but a great example of like a very good deck that kind of tilted on a bunch of axes and never really had the same game plan going into a lot of things. Had a bit of random generation, but it wasn't egregious to the point where you played against one. I mean, the only issue really with that deck was like Ice Block. I think was Ice Block and Primordial Glyph. I think were in that deck, right?
Yeah, and
But, like,
that's you know
That's not really, that didn't really have anything to do with the deck as much as that card. Whereas like the deck without that, I think was a pretty good example of how there's having that really good balance of variety in gameplay, but consistency of still being able to enact a game plan of being able to win the game, I guess.
And I think most modern Highlander decks are actually pretty good about this. When I say modern, I mean not including the card Reno Jackson. The card Reno Jackson is a bad example of this. Of single cards that the game pivots on, did I get this card or did I not? The post Luna's Pocket Galaxy Highlander Mage, you weren't pivoting on just LPG. And if you drew Reno the Relicologist, like, it was good, but you didn't necessarily win the game. Zephyrus, very good, he didn't necessarily win the game. Post-nerf DQA, good, but he didn't necessarily win the game. I like the design of Highlander in general, even though I know it's had people that are not a huge fan of it, when the payoffs aren't so powerful, when it's still worth doing, but it's a reasonable trade-off. And I think that Highlander Mage, Highlander Priest right now actually has a pretty good balance there. But there have been versions where... What?
In Standard.
In Standard. In Wild...
In Wild, it's an
no.
example of too much consistency.
In Wild, there are a bunch of problems there. Including, but not limited to, the card Reno Jackson, which was a cool way to introduce the concept and a bad way to execute it. Because, yeah, the game shouldn't just come down to... Reno Jackson is actually kind of the poster child of this problem, of the game against decks with Reno, if you were aggro, is do they have Reno or not?
Or
And-
can I kill them before turn 6?
Yeah. Or can I deal 60 damage? Because if you can kill them twice, then sure. If you can force them to Reno and then still kill them, which I have done before. But it is not a pleasant gameplay experience of this game has exactly 2 paths. They have it or they don't. And they are so dramatically different in terms of how the game plays out.
Yeah.
And there's
I would say
go ahead.
we've seen some other examples that have had me worried on some of these fronts. So when Embiggen came out, I was really nervous. And when we were seeing some Embiggen druids, because it was effectively a Kaliseth you could have 2 copies of. It made your stuff cost more, so it was more balanced, but it's still kind of this thing where it's dependent on you drawing it early for a very powerful effect. And if you don't get it, your deck is just kind of minions that can't be targeted by spells. It was that whole thing of your deck is sort of weird unless you draw the power card. Hunter recently got a card that I do kind of like playing with, but it is still this problem. Death Star's messing around with a Hunter based on the buff all beasts in your hand by +2/+2 if it's corrupted.
Feed the animals.
Yeah, feed
Or
the
don't
animals.
feed the
and
animals.
so
Yeah.
it's I think it's a little okay because it ends up being more of a combo deck than a high roll deck. Because you're buffing like Tundra Rhino and the Wind Fury 1/1 beast and Stone Tusk Boar, Wolpertinger. Actually, I don't know if it's Boar anymore, but definitely Wolpertinger. So you have some of these minions that benefit from being buffed, and you try and OTK them with either Tundra Rhino or the Trampling Rhino with True Aim Crescent. So that is like a healthier implementation, and basically because it's not as powerful. It's just beasts. It's just in your hand, not your deck. So there's a lot more limitations.
I'll take your word
Shando.
for it on this deck because it sounds highly suspect.
I mean, it's definitely a thing that like it could be a problem because it's a bit high roll, but that's partially because Hunter doesn't have quite the card draw to make it really a combo deck. I don't know. It is weirdly positioned and definitely has some of those same feelings where it's like, well, if they never get that card, they'll struggle to win.
Yeah. There's a point where a deck can be inconsistent enough that people just stop playing it in large volumes or never pick it up in large volumes. And that's a reasonable thing, that if you make something powerful with built-in fail cases, like, that can be there. You can have your dual paladins in the game. If they high roll sometimes, but then other times they just lose because the deck is inconsistent, you can make things like that unless you print more support for it later and it becomes way too good. And there's a fine line for that of when a deck is a meme, it feels very different than when a deck is really good. And if you want an example of that, you look at Big Priest. Because Big Priest was totally a meme when it first came out. And then it got way better because they kept printing good cards for it. Like stupid Diamond, Spellstone, whatever. And then the deck became gross. And yeah.
Similarly, Evolve Shaman, honestly.
Yep.
Right?
Multiple times.
We
More than once.
Yeah. We sort of laughed at the Bogspine Knuckles decks, and they were kind of a mean and like kind of okay. People were playing them as like the trendy thing, and now we don't feel that way. Bogspine Knuckles hasn't changed. It's just the consistency that has changed. We used to run the Galakron package in Evolve Shaman just for like stuff to evolve, something to do. So you would have effects while you were trying to get your stuff online. But because of the addition of Cage Match Custodian, you have 4 copies of Bogspine Knuckles. And then because of that consistency, you can add double Horde Pillager so that when they're destroyed, you can have them again. It's this snowball effect where things go from, powerful, kind of high rolly, a bit of a meme, to you add a little more consistency and they're too strong. So
interesting segue.
Yeah. So let's talk then a little bit about the redundancy versus boredom. And these all kind of have a lot of things in common. We're going to touch on various things in parts of other conversations, but sort of the balance of being able to consistently do what your deck wants to do versus the same game actions over and over. We do want to have consistency as part of what makes a good deck, but where this gets to be a negative is when we have Baku and Gen are sort of the most egregious examples on this one. Hero powers are inherently dangerous when it comes to this issue of redundancy. The Warlock hero is extremely challenging to balance because their hero power allows them to draw cards. And having a built-in way of trading life for cards means that if the meta isn't pressuring your life total, you're going to be able to consistently execute your game plan regardless of you actually having card draw in deck, since it's just built into the hero power. Demon Hunter has this issue not out of their hero power so much as their class identity, which involves a ton of card draw.
And
That's
damage. Card draw and
damage.
damage. Yeah.
And damage. So that's
those
why
things are
we've
good together.
Seen some crazy powerful combo decks in Demon Hunter right now, and before there was the Kael'thas OTK decks, and now we've got the Il'gynoth OTK decks. And
you look at the difference between redundancy and boredom. AK for life, thank you so much for that tier 1 subscription. But I want to illustrate kind of the difference between redundancy and boredom, right? Because it's okay to be able to do what you want to do. Having a deck where it feels like it's almost there, but your cards don't quite work most of the time can feel pretty frustrating. I think there have been a lot of examples of almost there decks. You look at, I think really before they buffed Aldor Attendant, and even before Scholomance came out, you look at what Pure Paladin looked like in Descent of Dragons, and even in early Ashes. And it felt like a deck that was almost there, but was missing some important cards. Really was missing Goody 2 Shields, for example. That was a big one. And it was missing the Aldor Attendant buff. So it felt like a deck that sometimes you would curve out and hit your pure cards on curve and it was good. And other times you just whiffed. And then having a few more cards in the deck made it playable and made it fun. And you could actually do what you wanted to do with it. Letting players do what they want to do and play with their own cards effectively is a good thing. But when it becomes the same game actions every single game, Gen Baku is the standout example. But you can look at current Evolve Shaman, you can look at pre-nerf Raiding Party Rogue, where it was always prep into party into Waggle Pit Corsair and to kill you with some amount of damage. It was always the same thing, where Dr. Boom Control Warrior was always gain a bunch of life, kill your stuff, slam Dr. Boom, because you have all the time in the world to find it, and then play Omega Devastators and Ziliaxes and whatever until the game is over. When those things start to become so rote and so reliable and so predictable, things get boring, and we have that right now with Evolve Shaman. Current Evolve Shaman, you play the weapon, play a Dread Corsair if you have one. Next turn you evolve something that costs 3 and makes a bunch of tokens. Then you play Horde Pillager and get it back, and you just keep doing that till your opponent dies. Way too repetitive, way too boring. But before Cage Match Custodian, well, Evolve Shaman barely existed, so we were doing what? We were doing Totem Shaman sometimes. And watching Boticus play Totem Shaman was a lot of fun, because, the deck worked sometimes, and it was almost good enough, and players weren't expecting it, and your play skill could actually influence how consistent the deck was. It was interesting and fun to watch to see a deck be at kind of exactly that level of on the cusp. And it's fun to experience those decks, but then sometimes they have the natural fail state, and it balances itself out. And I like that a lot more than what we're seeing right now with Evolve Shaman.
Yeah, absolutely. And Demon Hunter, I think, is going to encounter this problem a lot over the course of its design because they've leaned so heavily into card draw and damage, which are pretty dangerous things to have together. But the aggro Demon Hunter, it did the same thing a lot, right? It played out its hand and then played a Voracious Reader or a Skull of Gul'dan or a Polkelt into Skull of Gul'dan and would get a bunch of refill and just like keep going and going. It felt like you had to do something to gain enough life and keep clearing their board that frequently they had no cards left by the end of the game. And usually you want an aggro deck to gas out at some point. You don't want to have to run them into fatigue because you beat all their cards. That can happen, but that probably shouldn't happen.
Bodicus thoughts?
Not a whole lot about this topic specifically. Yeah, it's also it's kind of interesting to talk about in general, just because boredom can be a thing of something gets played so much that it becomes boring to play against very quickly, but also it can also get to the point where it sticks around for so long because nothing changes from it that it gets boring as well. So
Right.
it's kind of interesting that you still want to have those decks that are super interesting for a while, but you don't want it to stay the most interesting thing for a super extended period of time. I think probably the most prime example of that was Overload Shaman, right? Back in Tunnel Trog days, where they just didn't nerf anything for
Right.
forever.
Undertaker was unnerved for 6 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just like
Spirit Claws, 6 months.
lots of prime examples of how I think they've done a great job of increasing their nerf schedule, I guess you could say, by just I think it helps out with that a lot. But since the schedule is also increased, it might also affect people's ability to get bored with stuff quicker because they're expecting the nerfs to happen more often, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I believe also, again, people have been playing more, right? They're going to play more over the holidays, so there's that. And if you don't like the meta when you have more time to play, it feels all the worse in some senses. Another note I have in terms of this issue is aggro decks are going to run into this problem more than control decks. And the reason for that is an aggro deck is generally looking to close out the game within a much smaller window. So if they're able to consistently do that, you're going to feel it. A control deck is just going to have more variance because the game goes longer. So there's more things that can go wrong in terms of their game plan.
But not all aggro decks are completed or are created equally. Aggro Demon Hunter in the most recent incarnation was nerfed because it was busted. But you look at current Zoo, and you've got a very big difference from the Dark Lair Raised Dead games to the Flame Imp into, whatever 2-drop we're playing now. Flame Imp into double 1-drop, really, or Flame Imp into tap. And you've got the Revenant Rascal games, and you've got the Nightshade Matron into Hand of Gul'dan games. There's a bunch of different things going on in Zoo, and not all of them are equally powerful. And not all of them are equally powerful in all situations. And I like that design a lot. Old Aggro Demon Hunter was damage, 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 card draw damage. That was too good. One of my favorite aggro decks, and I think a relatively healthy one in most incarnations over the course of Hearthstone's history, is Face Hunter. Because most of the redundancy is in the hero power, but there's a very real cost to using it over developing. And when you are late game in Face Hunter, and you need to top deck a burn spell, and you top deck Intrepid Initiate, or Adorable Infestation, or whatever, you're not closing out that game. You top deck Eagle Horn Bow, then you're winning that game. But if your opening hand is Eaglehorn Bow, Kill Command, Phase Stalker, you're falling behind early. You need to hit things in a certain order, and your hero power kind of gives reliability, but not stale boredom. It's not the same. It's trying to do the same thing every game, but the way that it gets there can definitely vary, especially how we've seen Face Hunter builds have changed over time in this very expansion, in this entire year. You've got the Toxic Reinforcement builds, you've got the Adorable Infestation builds, you can go a bunch of different ways with it, and I like that idea of the built-in reliability of the hero power without needing to really lean into a specific card that you draw at the right time. As opposed to when Scavenger's Ingenuity was first printed, people were just like, let me just go get a 4/4 Stone Tusk Boar and Soulfire you. That was not good. You don't want to do that. But now they've nerfed it. It's okay. And I love something like Scavenger's Ingenuity. When a deck building challenge is done right, you only run a few specific beasts, and it lets you kind of curtail the randomness. But we're not just running one beast now, we're running Wolpertinger and Phase Stalker because they're both good hits, but which one you hit makes a big difference to how your game plays out. So there's also that innate variance there. That feels like a pretty healthy thing to me. Pretty healthy thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Face Hunter is, like, decent right now, but it's not overtuned. I want to move on to this sort of last topic we have here, the value of randomness and the danger of efficient randomness. And this comes up a lot because people like to get upset about randomness. It feels no skill most of the time, and it's very easy to get tilted from randomness. Random things tend to be the things that a lot of the casual player base find fun, and so this is where there can be a real difference between players that play more casually and players that are playing with thousands of dollars on the line. I kind of don't like, box effects, but Twitch chat always wants you to play Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron. I think what we have seen in terms of the past year and sort of its being egregious in terms of RNG. I think honestly, not this year as much as last year. It's sort of like the last year stuff for the most part. A few things this year, but has been a compounding of randomness and random things being too powerful. It is much more palatable when we have randomness for things that we can agree, like, okay, this deck is a meme. But when Yogg-Saron is deciding your world champion, that's not really something we want. It doesn't feel earned. And I think we've had issues now where you have to follow a chain of events, like created by, to get to the card that was finally played. I know this can happen a bunch in Priest, a bunch in Mage, a bunch in Rogue. Those are the top 3 RNG classes, I think.
And this has changed over time, right? Like, this has definitely been something that's adjusted over time. And I want to make sure as well, I think Discover is a great addition to the game.
Mm-hmm.
But too much is not good. Too much of anything is not good. Discover, randomness in general, and if you're going to put a lot of it into the game, you don't want it to be the best thing you can do. We've talked about this many times on the show. An example that I have in the show notes of when randomness was definitely the best thing you could do. 3-mana Conjurer's Calling and Cyclone Mage. Way too good. And that deck then also got the inconsistency issue of 5-mana Luna's Pocket Galaxy being so incredibly, unbelievably broken when you drew it. But 3-mana Conjurer's Calling with Mountain Giant gave you just too much stuff too quickly. And the issue there wasn't even the RNG. It was the efficiency. And most of the time, the issue with randomness is not the randomness itself, but it's the efficiency. And that's where Rogue has gotten in trouble in the past, where some of it is draw order, some of it is like the original Rogue Galacrond was very much like draw order and did I get my invokes in time, and then what did I hit? but also random generation has been there when you look at the more recent iteration of Cyclone Mage, which played 4 evocations a game. And I think that deck was remarkably consistent, in fact, but the issue was it felt like it could always find the one answer out of nowhere. It could always find the counter spell or whatever, or a Ray of Frost that it needed. It could always dig for an answer that it hadn't started with reliably and find something because it had so many looks in the box.
Yeah, you would play a Cobalt that would give you 2/1 mana spells, and if you didn't hit the evocation, you could maybe get the magic trick, and the magic trick would find the evocate. Just the chains were ridiculous in Priest as well. As soon as you're adding the Priest Galakron to your deck, and previously when we were facing a bunch of Galakron Rogue, the Rogue Galakron, getting a bunch of lackeys which have discover, any number of things, or getting a bunch of priest minions, random priest minions, which many of whom also either discover cards or give you random cards. You've got Sethic Veilweaver, you've got Madame Lazul from your opponent's hand. It creates these chains where you kind of, you don't even know like how far back it goes. And I think I'm more comfortable when you can trace things back like 2, maybe 3 max in terms of like how far back the chain goes. But
it's hard to say. There's no clear answer, right? Because it's so contextual.
And also, like, I don't know, for maybe, I know this definitely isn't for everyone, and I'm going to get accused of some things because I'm going to talk about Priest, but I don't think that the Priest Galakron was necessarily an egregious offender of this particular. I actually think it leans more towards the good bit of randomness, just because it has traditionally not been as powerful as an effect such as like the Deathstalker Rexar. Like Deathstalker Rexar, I think, was way more egregious because the amount of randomness when you're discovering 2 minions and putting them together, whereas I mean the Priest Galakron doesn't even would come in and out of lists based on what was happening, and it was just kind of more of a resource generator that was less of a, I don't know, it probably just because I played the deck a lot, it felt like less of a thing that was giving crazy random effects, whereas it was, even though the difference in priest minions was so vast, it was still just like a consistent source of value versus a source of high rolling, I guess.
It was an Elysiana, right? Like, it was, you needed it
Right.
to keep up in terms of value, but you weren't dependent on what it made. It didn't matter what it made. It was like, it was like pre-update Deathstalker Rexar, where it was in mid-range hunter decks before the Lifesteal and Rush update, just so you could outlast warrior decks. And it didn't really do anything else other than be a 6-mana consecration, because all you did was you just made a bunch of crappy value beasts, and then you just played a bunch of crappy value beasts. Nobody cared what you got. But then, post-update, you would get a rushing, poisonous, explosive bloat bat, and suddenly you would clear your opponent's board, and it was a crazy, gross high roll. So it's the balance there of a random effect because I need just any value. That's going to be different than specific relevant values. And it's going to be different when it's efficient versus when it's not. Disciple of Galakron is very efficient. Something like Shield of Galakron was good enough. Devoted Maniac we didn't think was good enough, and that was kind of our indicator that maybe Galakron wouldn't be a thing. But it turns out Invoking in some classes was just super worth it. And, a costing like Devoted Maniac made us think that maybe they'd figured out Rush because we didn't really understand how valuable Invoking was yet. But a lot of this randomness stuff is just, what is the cost and what is the benefit? And you can look at something, when you go back in the day, You look at old randomness, the way it was designed with hyphens. And this was a much worse implementation when you look at Crackle. When you look at Implosion. These cards are awful. Because
Lightning Storm.
Yeah. It's either just worse than you need it to be or better, and you have no control over it, and you just have to play it anyways. And it's either way too efficient or not, and you have no way of knowing you're influencing it until you just play the card. It's terrible. At least Discover has some kind of agency. At least these limited pools have some kind of relevance. When you play Ysera Unleashed, a druid card, you know you're going to get some dragons eventually. So you play it because dragons are generally big, and then you need some big stuff eventually, and the order you hit them is inconsistent. I don't really love that play pattern, but at least you know you're going to hit some dragons. When you Crackle, sometimes it's a really bad lightning bolt, and other times it's a fireball. It's awful. Just awful. It's
interesting because a card that kind of has that same potential, but I think is actually a good version when we talk about this, and it's kind of just been a staple forever, is Brawl.
Yeah.
I think Brawl is just like a really good example. It's definitely properly costed.
And you can influence it, right? Like, you can do things to change the outcome.
You can influence it, and it also gives a bit of excitement whenever you play it. And whether it's a good excitement or bad excitement, like sometimes you're playing it and you're like, I really need this Edwin to not live, and sometimes it lives and you're disappointed. But it still has a bit of an excitement to it that I think is important to have in a game where you're playing this card because it's good enough and it works and it does what you're trying to do, but it doesn't always do what you're trying to do. And I mean, the setup of it's perfect because you don't just play Brawl and then it just picks the minion and then that lives. It literally like throws them all in and creates this moment of tension, which I think is really good. But like Puzzle Box kind of does that same thing, but it's just like so much and way more game breaking than a card like Brawl.
Well, I think it's because of the number of effects that exist right now that do discovery things. So or random things. So if you look at Mage, Rogue, and Priest, all have a card that's kind of similar. Mage has Mana Cyclone, Priest has Sethic Veilweaver, and Rogue has World Kickmaster, which previously we didn't think World Kickmaster was good because the stuff in its pool wasn't good enough to merit running it. But as value cards, I think they can be all right. You can miss, it's fine. But when you're getting things like, Mage has Magic Trick, it has Evocation, it has Primordial Studies. The studies, I think, were actually kind of rough in terms of being included because they were all 1 mana, so they all can come off of the Dragon and Wand Maker, and they all discover a thing, and they kind of discover things that can get you more things. I'm just thinking of like you play the dragon that gives you 1 mana spells, and you get a Draconic Studies, and it gives you back the dragon that gives you 1 mana spells. And
but these aren't like
one of those 1 mana spells is a renew.
These aren't really good things to do in Standard right now. It's if that was what the format was about, then sure. But the studies are dangerous when there's a payoff that's worth doing. And Priest right now doesn't really have that. I mean, I guess one of the benefits of the warp meta is that value just doesn't matter right now because all the mid-range decks crush people.
But it's not. I think there's a lot of cards that we never run in decks, but we're still used to seeing a lot because they come off of some of these random effects.
Yeah. I suppose that we've seen a lot of Primordial Studies has come up. Like, I've taken Primordial Studies off of Wand Thief in Rogue, like, a bunch of times. It's definitely possible to find these cards elsewhere.
Well, and I'm just thinking of, so my Quest Shaman has like kind of a decent amount of RNG in the fact that it runs Wandmaker and Vulperius Scoundrel and Instructor of Higher Heart, and so you've got some discover spells in there, and you've got some random 1-mana spells. Kind of for the most part, it ends in one discovery, because I get a shaman spell. That shaman spell does a thing. I pick it based on what I think I'm going to need my game plan to be. Get something aggressive. Maybe I want an earthquake as backup. If I'm against something slower, maybe I want to spec on a bloodlust for a bunch of damage. But if I pick up a Primordial Studies, that Primordial Studies can get me the spell damage discover a spell minion, which can then get me more spells. And that's one instance, there's one specific thing that can happen in Shaman. It doesn't come up a lot. But I feel like in the classes that get sort of called out the most for RNG, that kind of chaining happens a lot, and that's what feels the worst. If you are a priest and you get a skeletal drake, and that skeletal drake gives you an Ysera, and those Ysera portals give you an insane board.
Sure. And they've talked about how they're moving away from the level of generation they have right now, which I think is a smart thing. A lot of that was introduced during DoD.
Yeah. And that's why I say a lot of it is last year, and I think that there are some things that were introduced in this year that feel bad because we're still playing with cards from last year, but I think will be more tolerable once we're not playing with those cards from last year. I have been more okay with this implementation of Yogg than I expected.
Yeah. It helps that it's not good enough right now, right? Helps a lot. But yeah, I agree. It feels less reliable at everything except clearing boards. It feels more reliable at clearing boards and less reliable at literally everything else. Whereas in the past, you would just slam it and you would refill your hand and probably kill everything, and sometimes cast Call of the Wild and kill your opponent.
Yeah.
So Botticus, bring us home.
Yeah. So I think this has been a good discussion. I really love talking about this stuff, but I really want to make sure we get to the point, which is which is answering the question that Merriweather asked, which is, in the opinions of the class, does Hearthstone push these polls too far? The polls of consistency versus randomness, and if so, what decks have you found that hit the right balance? I think we've gone a lot into like the decks and the cards that really push this, but I think that the answer is yes. Hearthstone does push these polls too far, but I would follow up by saying, and they should, because in my opinion, if you don't push these polls too far, you don't find out where the limits are. And I think that finding where those limits are and being able to have a more informed decision about what makes the game fun and where you can push this, because I think there is a level on both sides that you want to try to achieve, and people enjoy the game for such different reasons that sometimes they want it to be pushed to the level of consistency and that they feel like they can play a deck and do what they want and execute a plan and it's good, all the way to they want to be able to sometimes chain a bunch of spells together that randomly end up winning them the game. I think that having a flow going back between those two is important, and if you don't push it to the limits of what you can do, you won't find out what different levels of fun can be. All that being said, as long as you're paying attention and balancing and having constant updates that that let them bring it back a bit when they hit those limits. So I do think that they do push those limits. I think they should push those limits, and I think they need to reel it back in a reasonable amount of time when those limits have been hit. And I think as we have gone over the course of the time that we've been doing this show, they've made leaps and bounds, great changes into making sure that they do this, and I think they'll get better at determining where those pulls are and maybe not hit them quite as often, but I think they should still sometimes push it to the point where they do hit it, because I think it helps them create a better game over time, which is all what we all want. We want want to be playing the best version of Hearthstone possible.
I think it's important to remember that a team of even 100 people is not going to be able to figure out a bunch of stuff regarding testing as quickly as once it gets released to the masses. So they're going to do their best, and I think they, as Boudica said, they need to kind of push in both directions to kind of get a sense and figure out the in-between, so that they can try and get it as close to right as possible. But they want to make cool cards. They want to make stuff that's fun to play with, and I think the important thing is that as long as they're comfortable, making changes once we sort of figure out that something is maybe not healthy, I like that. I like having stuff get thrown into the system and being powerful a bit, and then it's time for it to go. It's time for it to get balanced. I think that's fine. I like how something like League of Legends always doing these patch notes, updates, little tweaks to different things, and so seeing that kind of thing with Hearthstone, I would enjoy a lot. When it comes to the randomness stuff in particular, there's always going to be differences of opinion in terms of what is the appropriate of randomness, because people have different ways that they like to play the game, and on average, your grinders, your tournament players are going to want more consistent stuff than your more casual players. That's just because they want to reliably be able to get good at a thing and know that it's going to do what they're trying to do with it. To that end, those players tend to prefer the end of a meta when things are kind of solved, rather than playing right after we've had balance changes, because they like that stability. So I think a good comparison to me of something that's hit a right balance was, at least I guess the RNG thing's just still in my mind, but looking at when we had Lyra versus now Sethic Veilweaver. Lyra was pretty tolerable because, yes, you could draw to it, and you often would Lyra in a game, but even though you were getting a bunch of random stuff off Lyra, generally, they would kill the Lyra or something, or maybe you won that turn, but the following turn you weren't doing a bunch of random stuff with the random things you generated on the Lyra turn. It was just kind of gaining a bunch of value. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but I think that there were a lot fewer cards that gave other cards from that point at the time.
I think so. I'm remembering more Radiant Elemental with Lyra just meant it didn't really matter what you got. You just got to kind of play everything. And there have been there have been ups and downs here. It's important to remember our perspective is going to be pretty narrowly focused at the more competitive side. Like Edelweiss said, there's more than one way to play the game, and there's more than one type of Hearthstone player. Original Yogg was bad for tournament players and very good for everybody else, because Hearthstone really showed what it could do as a digital game. It was hugely popular, it was splashy, it was fun, and outside of competitive brackets, players were just playing it when they could, and stuff would happen, and they'd be like, wow, that was cool. And it wasn't people narrowly optimizing their decks to be the best Yogg deck. They were playing Yogg because Yogg was fun. And it was important for them to make a card like Yogg, even though it ended up being overtuned. There's a difference between bad design and bad balance. They were able to fix Yogg by changing the effects slightly from a competitive standpoint. Gen and Baku, I think, are the worst mistakes in Hearthstone history because there's no knob to turn, there's no dial to adjust. I will say, historically, my issues with Hearthstone have been when the gameplay is too samey, when it's too consistent, when Gen and Baku is around, or when you're recruiting the same stuff over and over again. And right now I don't really love the Evolved Shaman meta, though I do enjoy still playing Rogue, because you have a good bit of variety from game to game, even though you do powerful things all the time. But that doesn't mean they should stop printing Scavenger's Ingenuity or Corsair Cache, which I think are great cards that help the deck function. This is a high-level conversation about how hard it is to design a card game, because you need variety, but some level of redundancy. You need to avoid boredom, but have some level of randomness. You can't push any of these things too far, or rather, if you do, and when you do, and I agree 100% with Botticus, that you have to test the limits, but you're gonna mess it up eventually. Really, they should probably mess it up most expansions, and if they get it right, it's usually by some kind of happy accident, because it's so hard to see how all these puzzle pieces fit together. If card games were easy, we'd know everything right away. They wouldn't be an interesting medium. The value of card games is the discovery goes on forever, and people keep finding new things in a format to this day. I'm glad they're doing mini sets. I'm glad they're adding more variety to the game. Really thrilled about the increased nerf cadence, because it lets them test more stuff. And some of my favorite decks over the course of the game's history have had some innate variance, but not too much. Ungoro Burn Mage. Arcanologist doesn't always draw you the right secret. Primordial Glyph doesn't always find you what you want. Sometimes Firelands Portal gets you something crappy. Sometimes it gets you a Doomguard. Sometimes it gets you a Lyra. Those are fun games. Sometimes you play Medivh and then you generate a legendary that wins you the game, and other times you play Medivh and you generate a legendary that's actively bad for you. There can be variety and consistency at the same time, but each person is going to have a different opinion on what's fun in any given meta, and there's no universally right or wrong decision in the vast majority of design. This is how it's going, and some people like it and some people don't. Doesn't mean they should or should not have done it. It just means they made a choice that some people will like and some people won't like. They have to be careful about how they do that, but it's very difficult, and design and balance are fundamentally different things. Whenever we've talked about randomness just can't be the best thing you can do, that's just a mana cost. You can fix that. That's a fixable thing. Rogue Galacrond felt oppressive at 4 invokes when all the cards cost nothing. It's nowhere near good enough right now. All they did was change 1 number in the card. They can do that with basically anything. They can do that with almost anything. Can't do it with Genabaku. And that was where I think they made the biggest mistake, because they printed a powerful marquee effect that they couldn't change.
They could change it, but it would also just make them not be cards.
Yeah,
I mean, they would have had
Imagine
to
if
turn them into different
Oh,
cards.
if Gen costs 7.
If Gen costs 7, Baku costs 10.
Yeah.
Oops.
They would change the effects.
Yeah. Very
I mean,
significantly.
I think the only way they could have not Hall of Famed those early the way they did would have been to say, hey, we made a mistake with these. Here's what they do now, and they would just be different cards, which is not something you want to do, right? That's not a balance change. That's a redesign, and that's just not something you do with card games.
It can be.
I will say again, that is around the Hearthstone unique thing of hero powers, which is tricky because it's a thing that you can always do once a turn, every turn.
So they designed good hero power cards with the Saviors of Uldum quests. You know why that's good design? Because the cards are bad. Because they're all unplayable right now. And it's not about pressing the button
right
over.
now.
Well, Quest Druid was playable for
It
1
was.
expansion. Quest Shaman was playable for 1 expansion.
The
Hey.
side quest for Hunter was good for a little bit.
Okay, side quests. I'm not talking about side quests. I'm talking about the quests that change your hero power. The Saviors
that
quest.
change your hero power.
Yeah,
Okay.
all the Saviors ones are hero power quests. They're all pretty bad, and I like how they implement, like the Quest Druid one, it's not actually a button that you press every turn. It changes how your cards work, but it doesn't give you a required game action every turn. I really like that design, but most of that design was also tied up in the fact that the cards really weren't good enough, so that when you make something that has a major trade-off of costing a card and it gives you a hero power, the hero power can't be game-winning, and that means it's usually not worth the card. And I like where those landed. I like that those cards were on the cusp of good enough the second they came out and only got worse, because you don't want to incentivize just pressing the button over and over again.
Actually,
and there was
basically all of
there was a
them
deck
saw
building
play.
challenge. Yeah.
Basically, all of them saw play, with the exception of Hack the System, at some point. Like, I don't think any of them, with the exception of like Quest to Druid, which was the most playable out of all of them, I guess.
Mage
But
one
all
was
of them
pretty
saw like,
bad.
Yeah,
oh
the
yeah, sorry, no,
Mage
Mage was actually worse than Hack the System.
Mage and Warrior were the
Yeah.
worst.
But yeah, they all were
But-
like context dependent and had specific roles. And Shaman was cool, but not actually tier 1 unless you gave it the actual card evolve, which you shouldn't really do. And Druid was like good for one expansion, then kind of okay for the other ones, but not really. And that's like a good space for these things to be in, that kind of consistency should have a really major cost. And that's a good thing. But there have been times where they thought that odd and even was a major cost, but it really, really wasn't. Really, really wasn't. It actually rewarded you because your deck got more consistent because your most powerful effect started the game next to your hero portrait. And that's something they flirted with a few times. And understanding the cost of deck building challenges is not an easy thing to do, but they've gotten better at it. They're not perfect at it yet, but they've gotten better at it. I think that winds
that was
us
a
down.
good topic.
Yeah. Thank you, Merriweather. That was really fun to discuss.
Yeah.
We like talking about game design. We're armchair designers. None of us make games, but we like talking about this stuff a lot, and we think about Hearthstone an awful lot. There's no news this week, so Blizzard, if you want us to not like talk about your game this much in the same way, then just give us something else to talk about, and that'll be cool.
Or if you want us to, feel free to come on the show and talk to us about it and tell us why our opinions are skewed or wrong, or how we could even improve our thoughts on our versions of Armchair game design.
Yes. Come on the show, and please.
When I did a design challenge for interview, that was like one of the hardest things I've done. It was like 30 hours I put into that thing, maybe more. Just super challenging. Like I needed a day to break every now and again because it was I really struggled. So, and some cards or some concepts I came up with very quickly, and others were a serious struggle. So it's, you know, people like to think that like it's just this amazing position to be in designing a game, but it is a lot of work.
And it's very difficult, and a lot of times a clever idea will have a blind spot, and the entire process is kind of finding your blind spots as well. Figuring out how your idea, you want to make sure that your ideas don't break something you're not thinking about. Because it's very easy to break something you're not thinking about. Like, say, Turtle Mage. Yeah, that'll happen. So, that'll wrap it up. Merriweather, thank you so much for the topic. And we have many other folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at coincide.com. You can find our contact info, our show notes, our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/coinconcede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.coinconcede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com. Write into our email, coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at CoinConcede. Like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/CoinConcede. For like some CC swag, heading over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, number 30 Tenor Wizard Tony S. K Pro B1, and Dr. Fish, our newest one. Also, huge thanks to the Twitch subs, Gun Syndicate, AK4 Life, TK, and Hungry Wizard. Thank you so much for subbing during the show. We appreciate you. I've got some CoinConcedes. Mixed Clouds for making an amazing Foxy Fraud wearing a hat emote. Mick, you were amazing. Con Before the Storm, we were going to do that panel on yesterday, and stuff happened in the United States, and we were all like, hey, can we reschedule? And Ro and Seraphus were very chill and like, yeah, let's do that. So that's going to be Sunday night at 8 o'clock Eastern. Tune in at twitch.tv/Con Before the Storm, and we'll be talking about Hearthstone and not thinking about current events quite as much. So, yeah, check that out. Niha and Virtute for sharing awesome Battlegrounds information in the Battlegrounds channel in the Discord. Really, really helpful. And Pelletire for just being a cool dude on Twitter. He's taking a step back from Hearthstone right now, but always had really reasonable and good thoughts. And, just grateful that he has good mind for the game. Barkus.
Just a quick coin concede to Smiley Chris, who challenged me to a friend quest yesterday, and I was like, "All right, well, let me put together a deck so I can complete some quests while I'm doing this." And then she said "whiz bang," and I was like, "Yes, we're doing that." And then I got this druid deck that literally just had ramp cards and gigantic minions with taunt, and I died. I thought I was winning. I was like, "Oh man, I'm just getting him. I have all these big minions." And then she played Quality Consecrate, or whatever the Libram version is
Justice.
that I haven't played in forever. Yeah, and then I got consecrated, and then she played big Libram.
Hope.
Yeah, she played pure paladin cards, and I died. So it was fun though, and I appreciate the request.
Whiz bang OP. What about you, Edelweiss?
Well, I forgot about it until Bot mentioned Libram cards, but shout out to the team for doing alternate Libram art for the Book of Heroes for Uther. That was really cool. Also, maybe offer some kind of cosmetic alternate art option for cards. That might be another way for people to whale out. Might offer support for other things to the game. We can do that. Just an idea. And then coin concede to Lady Danbury. I don't know if anyone else has been binging Bridgerton as a way of thinking about other stuff, but it's super fun. It's I think someone described it as combining like Gossip Girl with Downton Abbey. It's super fun. Great cast of characters, and this woman, Lady Danbury, is just like the most boss elderly woman I've seen in a piece of fiction in a while. So love that character.
Sounds fun. And that'll do it for our show this week. So keep calm and design in your armchair. And if you see us on the ladder, hold on, no, I got one. Keep calm and pick Druid at your level 50 portrait. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Don't do that. Coin concede.
Coin concede.
I like how disgusted you both were. Disgusted.
Still baffled. Just
yeah. Thanks so much, everyone, for hanging out. We're gonna cut the stream here. Coin concede. Good night, TGA.